Hey, it's Mike here, and today I'm going to do a response to Bonnie Rebecca's Why I'm No Longer Vegan video. I normally shy away from response videos, but I'm doing this one. I'm doing it.
I'm not vegan anymore. As you can probably tell by the title of this video, I was vegan for just over 5 years, and it was kind of everything to me. It was my whole life, my whole identity. It was the motivation behind my YouTube channel.
And I'm absolutely not here to attack Bonnie or Tim. Tim especially went through a lot throughout this whole thing. I more view it as a failure of vegan-specific care and harmful dietary vegan trends than them being delirious or succumbing to social pressures like other vegans who have quit in the past. Let me put it this way, I don't think we're gonna see a bacon taste test video from them like we have from other ex-vegans in the past. This case is definitely different. And also, they're both super nice people who did not want to be eating animals, so let's definitely be constructive here. All right, let's go. First of all, this is a 38-minute long video, so I'm not going to be able to respond to everything. But I think there are some very important lessons to be learned here. Sadly, we don't have medical records or time-traveling nanorobots to get concrete answers. But I do have some hypotheses about what happened to them, and I'll talk about some research on those, as well as what people can do to not go down that same pathway, reach those same pitfalls, and finally, how they could have maybe, possibly solved their issues while staying on a vegan diet. Possibly. So this video is going to have a fair amount of evidence-based speculation, if you will. All right, I've rambled enough. Let's get right into it. Let's look at Tim's story first, because the video really is mainly about Tim. For Tim's background, he never had acne. He never appeared to have serious digestive issues. Then, a few years back, he went on a durian rider style, high carb, high calorie, high fruit, smash it in, ride your bike type diet. In a bit, I'll make the case why I think this is where things went wrong, and I think they will agree, but moving on, then he ended up getting those digestive issues, that IBS and the acne. They then shifted their vegan diet a few times. They did the whole starch solution thing, then they added some fat, and then eventually Tim went on antibiotics. Things got a little bit better, and then as rounds of antibiotics went on, they got worse.
Things started to get really bad. All of Tim's symptoms were like 10 times worse than they were before he took the antibiotics, but he got a whole lot of other things going on as well.
His acne kept getting worse and his weight kept going down, and so they went to a bunch of naturopaths and specialists, etc., until finally they were sent to a nutritionist who advised them to eat fish and eggs. And then his skin cleared up and he was able to gain weight.
So the first thing he started eating was some fish and eggs. He had fish twice a day for lunch and dinner and eggs for breakfast. And within about 5 days, all of his symptoms had cleared. Yeah, trying to wrap my head around that was one of the hardest weeks ever.
Also want to add that it was like he was reacting to all these foods. His food allergy list kind of became longer and longer. And then when he finally went off the vegan diet, he was able to not have those issues anymore. Okay, so let's go back to the very beginning, to the fruitarian style high carb situation. Now there's an idea that I've really been sitting on for a while, but I haven't wanted to fully explore because there's just a lack of practical research on people that actually do eat a ton of fruit, but that is the idea of the fructose absorption limit. The reality is that the human body actually caps off the amount of fructose that it can absorb, and some people also have fructose malabsorption issues, which makes that even lower. And I want to add that fruit is generally very healthy, especially adding it to a Western diet. You're going to decrease risk of disease at 3 servings, 4 servings, 5 servings a day. But what happens if you are eating 20 to 30 servings of fruit a day? And looking to this study on healthy individuals, the human intestinal fructose system can be overwhelmed at greater than 50 grams of fructose. And quote, fructose malabsorption leads to a variety of gastrointestinal intolerance symptoms that resemble the symptoms presented by patients with IBS. And when patients with unexplained symptoms were given that 50 grams of fructose and took breath tests, 73% had elevated levels of hydrogen or methane, which is evidence of fructose malabsorption, and 80% of them had symptoms like gas, pain, bloating, belching, and altered bowel habit. And remember, that's normal people. From this study, people with IBS can have a fructose malabsorption reaction at just 15 grams of fructose. Now, what were people eating on that diet? What was it, 30 bananas in a single day? That's 213 grams of fructose. They could easily be sitting down to a meal of 70 grams of fructose. We also had the trend of doing all those date shakes, which have about the same amount of fructose per calorie, and all those other fruits that are also high fructose. But the question becomes, what happens to your small intestine when you are eating 150 to 250 grams of fructose per day when you can't even handle it? Of course, the fructose enters your mouth, goes down through your stomach, enters your small intestine. A lot of it doesn't get absorbed, but that is usable energy for the bacteria. They then have a bloom or a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth situation, which on the outside can manifest as diarrhea and definitely some discomfort. And as Bonny alluded to, SIBO can lead to intestinal barrier function being compromised, or as you probably heard it, leaky gut. From this study, SIBO inflames the lining of your gut, and quote, this inflammation may be a cause or an effect of an altered mucosal barrier in the intestine. Your compromised gut lining can then let some undigested proteins into your bloodstream. You can have all sorts of reactions and allergies and autoimmune situations from that. To theorize, at this point, the SIBO could have been so established that it started reacting to higher fiber alone or even carbohydrates of other sorts. And the round of antibiotics could have certainly put that SIBO at bay for a bit, but then it's also possible that some antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria then took over, and that would make a way less diverse gut biome because just those survived. There's also another thing that can cause leaky gut, and that is parasites. Bonny said that she had parasites, but it was unclear whether or not Tim had parasites. They were doing the whole biking in Thailand thing, so it could have been contamination there. So not particularly the vegan diet, and there isn't really that much that's said in the video about that, so let's just move on. At one point, Bonny said one of the practitioners determined that their omega-6 to omega-3 ratio was not good. It's unclear whether or not they had like an outright DHA deficiency. But one thing that was never mentioned in those high-carb, high-fruit days was get enough omega-3s. That was just not on the docket. And to cover your bases on this, a lot of doctors like Dr. Greger recommend taking algae-based DHA, the DHA that is in fish, and of course including a lot of that plant-based ALA like chia and flax and hemp. While they didn't specifically have DHA deficiency symptoms, skin issues can be a cause of low omega-3 consumption, and that brings me into the whole skin issue. Let's talk about acne. There are a few ways that this could have happened, and starting in the beginning, it could have certainly happened from pounding down that fructose in those sugars, which could have raised triglycerides and led to an acne problem in the first place. Tim's acne could have been increasing in severity because of zinc, a lowering zinc status over time because the absorption of zinc from plants is largely dependent on phytates. And in theory, as this study simulated, a healthy gut biome can digest all of the phytate and therefore can absorb the zinc. But Tim definitely did not have a healthy gut biome. So Tim wasn't able to absorb the zinc. We don't know exactly when it got low, but it was low at the end of the ordeal, and a lower zinc status is associated with acne, and skin and zinc are just very connected. Obviously, taking a zinc supplement would have been the quickest way to get his zinc status up, but there are other things you can do in terms of plants. Soaking plants gets rid of phytates, and you can also increase the bioavailability of zinc in whole grains by cooking them with garlic and onions. The second possibility, and this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and that is high doses of B12. Now, I don't know what level of B12 Tim was taking, but if you are trying to be as healthy as possible on a vegan diet, you might be slamming down high doses of B12 every single day. However, a small portion of people are sort of hyper responders in terms of acne to high dose B12. What happens is your body's B12 levels get so high that the actual bacteria on your face goes, oh, I don't need to make my own B12 anymore, and then gets kind of dysfunctional. From this simple live science explanation of a study on the topic, quote, the researchers confirmed that the B12 supplement repressed the expressions of genes in P. acnes involved in synthesizing the vitamin. This acne reaction to high-dose B12 happened in 10% of the subjects, and so if this did happen to Tim, he was just kind of dealt a bad deck of cards. And if it indeed was an issue for Tim, it makes sense because the moment he went on fish and eggs, he knows those have B12. I don't need to take B12 anymore. All of a sudden, he's not taking those high doses, and that could help his skin clear up. And maybe he wasn't taking high doses at all. Maybe this was totally not it, but just so people know, you don't have to take super high doses from this study. A small dose of vitamin B12 was able to get all of the subjects in the study out of deficiency. Now, before I get to solutions that could have potentially maybe worked for Tim, I want to talk about Bonny's case a little bit because some of the solutions overlap. It seems that Bonny's main issue was before she went vegan, she had bad constipation her entire life. She then went vegan, no longer had a fiber deficiency, and didn't have that problem anymore. But then over time, it became a bit of an IBS situation, not as bad as Tim's, clearly. She had pain, she had sensitivity to a certain area, and she had higher levels of inflammation. And I'm assuming her naturopath, whoever it was, tested her C-reactive protein and found that it was high. And it is worth noting that vegans have about 30% lower C-reactive protein. I'd be curious to see what her inflammation levels were before, but clearly they were still high and something needed to be done about that.
The main thing that he was concerned about, which was very high inflammatory markers. So I had a lot of inflammation, and that was kind of his main concern. Chronic inflammation can lead to, you know, things like autoimmune diseases. His protocol to help those things that he was mainly concerned about, which was the inflammation, the bacterial imbalance, is to change my diet, adding in fish and eggs.
And this is where I got a little confused in the video. So she decided to do the fish and egg thing, and did her digestive symptoms get better? It was a little unclear. Maybe they did, maybe she's still working on it, I don't know. Now, I'm gonna be honest, looking at Tim's situation, he was facing potentially being hospitalized for being underweight. He also had the insomnia and the depression. Like, I understand that. But with all due respect, when I look at what's going on with Bonny, I just don't necessarily think she really needed to give up veganism. I understand that when she saw Tim's problems being solved, she might think, oh, it will solve my problems as well. But from the video, it didn't seem like it had a dramatic effect on her. I just wasn't completely sold. Maybe she was selling her own suffering a little bit short in contrast to Tim's. Maybe her digestion did get 100% better. I don't know. But looking to something like eggs, eggs are the main source of cholesterol in the US diet at least, and so sort of trading some short-term discomfort for a increased risk of our leading killer in the West. Now I want to get into potential solutions. This one might apply to both of them, but I think it more applies to Bonny, and it might come off as really oversimplified, but that is about the connection between exercise and movement and digestion. Digestion and activity have a pretty intimate connection. I mean, there's a reason that when we make a bioreactor, it often has an agitator, which catalyzes, increases the chemical reaction, and humans are just meant to move. You may have seen my recent video where I went to Europe with Lindy, and that's why I wanted to bring this up, because she suffers from a lot of these same IBS type issues. She used to have a really bad digestion before she went vegan, but she still has some of these issues. But when we were walking all the time in Europe, they essentially 100% cleared up. I know it's completely absurd to say, Bonny, if you just would have walked more, then you wouldn't have had these issues. Like, that's probably really annoying to hear, but I did witness this happen firsthand. And of course, you know me, there's some research behind it. Looking to this meta-analysis of 683 patients with IBS from 14 randomized control trials, quote, the results of this review suggested exercise had significant benefits for patients with IBS, but I had to add this because it's pretty hilarious, but studies were limited by the strong risk of bias. I feel like most studies should say that, but obviously they were looking at other people's studies that could have been biased. This next study took women, put them on a light exercise regimen, and their IBS symptoms improved, leading the researchers to go as far as to say, quote, physical activity should be used as a primary treatment modality in IBS. I just know that Bonny used to be a dancer and then she got injured, and so she was able to exercise less, so that might be an issue. With Tim, it might have nothing to do with that. All right, let's move on. Now for a solution that applies to both of them. As Bonny said, it turns out it's not what animal protein has, it's what it doesn't have, and that is fiber. Fiber is good for you. Fiber is really important for, you know, healthy bowel movements and a healthy gut, but there is such thing as too much fiber, and especially when you have a damaged gut. That is, for whatever reason, they were both agitated by fiber. And my response to that is that it's possible to create a vegan diet on paper that looks basically exactly the same as the diet that they're eating right now, the diet that solved Tim's problems. For a simple example, let's compare what they might be eating now to a even lower fiber, fully vegan situation. For example, their lower plant plus egg breakfast versus a completely vegan low fiber one. So maybe they have a 600 calorie breakfast of potatoes and an omelet, which is 5 grams of fiber total. And compare that to a 600 calorie bowl of cream of wheat with 2 tablespoons of cashew butter, which is actually only 3.5 grams of fiber. And that's just an example. Maybe other whole grains would be better than wheat. It also could have been good to actually work with a specialist on this and design a low fiber plant-based meal plan that could have worked for them. Talking to somebody like Angie Sadeghi, or even reaching out to Goji Man, who's become a bit of a specialist in this area of gut issues. All right, now moving on to a bit of a left field solution here that people are going to be a little bit shocked that I'm putting out there, and that is oil. Now we have to think back at the situation here. Tim is switching up his diet a lot and he keeps losing weight, keeps feeling worse. Well, what food is better at having zero fiber and putting on as much weight as possible than oil? Oil is the ultimate obesity food. It's one of the only ways that vegans can become obese. And yes, I still think it's the vegan killer. It still damages arteries and so forth in the long run, but that was not the concern here. And I have to add, once again, that oil, in terms of its negative effects, is still a pretty big step lower than animal products. For example, coconut oil still raises LDL less than butter. Heck, even mock meats might have had the same result as trying that fish and eggs. I don't know. So to sum it up, Tim could have possibly ended up with the same solution by eating the same foods on paper, but vegan. He also probably would have benefited from lowering his dose of B12 if he was taking a high dose, getting those omega-3s in the diet, getting a good source of zinc, whether that meant supplementing or not. Ironically, adding some oil in as a low-fiber, high-calorie food, and finally, maybe both of them would benefit from doing some exercise or even just walking after every meal to get things going. But perhaps the most important point is that I totally understand what Tim went through. He went through a lot of pain, the insomnia, just what having acne does to your self-esteem, and so forth. So I really think of this mainly as a failure of the vegan medical community, not to be like vegan doctors suck, but just that we don't have this infrastructure that we need to have. Now, if some vegan who's a millionaire really wanted to make a difference, they could open a medical clinic that had really good distance services, that had like a fund available to get people these digestive tests and make it really user-friendly. Because the reality is here, speaking figuratively, even if 99% of vegans have improved digestion and have no gut issues, even if 1% do, because of how many people that are now vegan, we're looking at tens of thousands of people with gut issues. And there are many causes of this that aren't the vegan diet in particular. We have those antibiotics, we have preservatives, we have things like chloramine in the water, we have those non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen, we've got sedentary issues, we've got super high salt diets. The modern world is simply a gut killer. And just because vegans have better health metrics overall, I've said this before, it does not mean they are invincible. Vegans are still gonna have issues, and so it's good to be transparent about that. Still, a lot more people die of heart disease than IBS, and it's worth noting that about 10 to 15% of the normal population has IBS, so don't forget that. But if we can nip all these issues in the butt, then we can let more people be vegan and healthier long-term and save animals and have a lower impact on the environment. Now I want to express my final concern, which is a bit of a sensitive topic, and that is that because her video, by the time this one's out, will probably have 250,000 views in about 24 hours, which means it'll probably make her somewhere close to $1,000 in a day. And because in the past she's made her money as a social media influencer who has made vegan content, the logical thing would be to just keep sharing what she's eating and basically accidentally become a sort of ex-vegan figure. But final point in their favor, the fact that they're still eating 90-ish% plant-based and not just going full carnivore bacon mukbang all over the place is definitely good on them. And so for me, mostly I'm sad that they felt like they needed to quit because they clearly didn't want to and they don't want to be eating meat. And so that's just unfortunate. Hey, let me know down below what you think, and if you've had IBS and specifically cleared up IBS on a vegan diet, definitely let us know down below. I'm thinking in the future I might do a video with Goji Man going through solutions for people who have IBS on a vegan diet, so forth. All right, that's it for today. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.